I'm excited to have the opportunity to interview Larry Stewart, who's written, I believe, his first book, Man on the Run. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was an Alberta teacher. I taught for 28 years, and I'm now retired. I'm in the midst of a second career, which is safety consulting in the petroleum industry.
Prior to writing Man on the Run, had you done any writing?
Yes, I've done some. I produced a newsletter for the petroleum industry based on safety issues. I did that for approximately 3 years. And of course, during my academic studies, I had many submissions that I did. I know one example that showed me particularly that I had some talent in writing was during my master's degree at UVic. I submitted a paper called Wooed But Not Won, and it created quite a stir amongst all my classmates. So to me that was kind of amazing and did show me that I had some talent in the writing realm.
The paper wooed your classmates?
Yes, I guess you could say that.
Well, why don't you take a little bit of time to tell me a bit about the book?
All right, well, without giving too much away, Lance Knight is a average workaday Joe who experiences much the same things as most of us do, where he's working month to month, $0 in the bank account at the end of the month. So he decides to get out of that rat race, and to do that he robs a bank. And the rest of the story is about the pursuit led by Detective Rob Passaglia, a shrewd detective with the Vancouver Police Department. And the chase actually leads through the British Columbia rainforest, into the States, down into the Dominican Republic, and also into Peru. So it's basically a romp of international proportions.
So now you've got me curious. How exactly did you come up with the premise for Man on the Run?
Well, the idea came to me after following a news story quite a number of years ago. I don't remember all of the details exactly, but basically there was a man who murdered his wife, I believe, and crossed the border into Canada, which launched a huge manhunt. The man, I believe, eventually was found in a motel room dead after having committed suicide. And I got to thinking, what would I do if I was on the run? And I started thinking, well, I would do this and that. And so from that news story, I got the premise for this book.
How long did it take you to write Man on the Run?
Well, it probably took me well over 10 years. Naturally, I wasn't writing for 10 years straight, but I would do a part and then get busy with something else and drop it for long stretches of time. But yeah, it was probably well over 10 years ago that I started this project. Now, in the past year, I've been, I guess you could say, almost semi-retired, so I've had quite a bit more time to focus on the writing, and as a result I was able to finish it during this past year.
You mentioned Detective Rob Passaglia. I'd like to hear more about this particular character.
Yes, Rob Pasaglia is the other protagonist in this story. So he's the one that's leading the pursuit to bring Lance Knight to justice. He's a somewhat youngish detective with the Vancouver Police Department, but he's already distinguished himself with some very astute police work. So Lance Knight is certainly has his work cut out for him if he's going to evade capture from Detective Rob Pasaglia.
So would it be Detective Rob Pasaglia that you identify with, or is there another character in your book that you most would say you identify with?
I would say that Lance Knight is probably the character that and I think most people can identify with. He's the guy that's stuck in the workaday rat race, living from paycheck to paycheck. Most people, I think, can identify with that. But I've also closely associated myself with him. Of course, not to the extent of robbing a bank, but a number of the events that take place in Lance Knight's world are taken from events that I've also experienced at one stage or another of my life. Things like climbing a cliff, spending a night in a hot spring, swinging from trees. These are all things that I've done.
You mentioned quite a few locations that are a part of this book, Man on the Run. I'm assuming you must have had to do quite a substantial amount of research.
To a certain extent. I didn't have to do a whole bunch of research. I think the most research that I had to do was actually for the BC rainforest. I'm not a survivalist or anything like that, so I did have to look into the BC rainforest and some survival techniques, and I incorporated what I found into the book. Other locations are taken directly from my experience. Like I know Peru fairly well, and most of the other places. So that comes from my own personal experience.
From reading the book, Man on the Run, I remember a significant part of the book took place in Peru. How were you able to manage to make that chunk of the book so real?
Well, I've spent quite a bit of time in Peru. I've visited the country well over 10 times. I'm not sure how many times I've been there, but I've been there quite a bit, and sometimes for a couple of months at a time. So I do know Peru quite well. So many of the things that take place in Peru are things that I've actually seen and experienced during my time in Peru.
And so if you could maybe enlighten me with an example of something that you experienced in Peru that also made it into Man on the Run.
Well, a couple of the events in Peru actually take place in a bank. And so the way the banks are run down there, with the long lineups at the beginning of the day, drawing numbers, the strict rules once you manage to get up to the teller, these are all things that are exactly the way they run banks down in Peru. So they are actually quite authentic the way they're described in the story.
Well, I have a copy of Man on the Run, but I'm sure that many people are going to want their own copy. How are they able to get a hold of that?
Well, actually, if you're living here in Alberta, The first way that you can get a hold of a book is we thought we would celebrate the publishing of Man on the Run. So we're throwing a bit of a book launch. It's going to take place December 16th, 4 o'clock to whenever, and it's just a drop-in affair. There's going to be fun, games, I'll be signing books, that kind of thing. So that's one way that you can get a signed copy of Man on the Run. But also, Man on the Run is available through iUniverse, so www.iuniverse.com. Just go to their bookstore, search Larry Stewart or Man on the Run, and the book should pop up. It's available in hard copy as well as an ebook. You can get it. You can get it there.
I can only imagine the fun that you had writing this book, and I believe that probably the fun just starts to get even more exciting from here with the book launch party and everything else. Congratulations. I wish you the most success with Man on the Run. I look forward to reading future things that you will also be writing, as I'm sure that once you have that bug of writing, that's going to be in you for good, and you'll be writing lots more.
Well, thank you very much.
I don't know.